Hi empaths, welcome back to my safe space and back to the journey through the Tarot. We're talking about our week with the Emperor, right? What a powerful week with this archetype, and introducing the Hierophant. This is going to be really interesting. This week was interesting as those masculine archetypes overlapped, right? This journey was inspired by Dirty and Divine by Alice B. Grist, a transformative journey through Tarot. She spent a day with each card. I'm spending a week, just giving her some credit for the inspiration. Also, my teacher, Robert M. Place. I'm getting a lot of the information about the cards, the history, the symbolism, the divination of the Tarot. Robert Place. And we are using the Waite-Smith symbolism in the Rider Tarot deck, right? Known as the Rider-Waite deck, or the Waite-Smith deck, right? So those will be available in my Amazon store if you're interested in purchasing any. I'll link that in the description. Particularly Robert's book, right? Or the deck. This is a must-have for anyone who's exploring, right, the Tarot, right? It's just so informative. So let's get into the week with the Emperor. Really powerful masculine archetype. I found that the day after I introduced the Emperor, right, in that video, the very next day I was more in touch with the controlling and aggressive part of me, which really came through in traffic. I noticed. I felt like I owned the road and the town, but it was making me really angry because the way people drive in this town is absolutely crazy making if you're trying to get to a destination. I started reciting the Reiki principles and throwing up thank you prayers to God for keeping us all safe, including the animals. It's that time of year where deer run out on the road, so just being really extra cautious and yeah, really feeling this sense of, I guess, self-control. So I'm I felt like an ownership or some kind of, I guess, really masculine, aggressive. It was a bit controlling in the beginning of the week. That's interesting. So it did feel like it was very much outside of me. So it was clear that was a shadow aspect to me at that point, because I was seeking that sense of control outside of me, right? And it was making me angry that people weren't showing up, particularly on the road, right? That road rage weren't showing up in a way that I felt was necessary for order. So, and efficiency, and that just drove me nuts. So that's one telltale sign that it's a shadow aspect for you, is if it's happening outside of you when you're working with the archetype. But I did find that my YouTube channel grew more significantly than it has, since I started really working on growing it. And that was an extension of the Empress Week, where the guidance came in to talk about empath information, right? And also more engagement started happening on Instagram and things like that. People asking me questions, right? Seeing me as having some kind of authority over helping empaths, right? Now that I'm putting out the information. And it wasn't even that deep. Like, I just did a video of what is an empath and then the 3 types of empaths on this channel. And so I haven't even put anything really that deep out. I have some recorded, but very simple, but it was very helpful to people. So sometimes we, fill in those informational gaps and think we know more than we do. And identify with something for a long time and not without really knowing what that means, right? So that's what I hope to do, is really put out the nuts and bolts of it, of that experience of being an empath. I also booked more clients this week. So I made some extra money, which is great, especially since I'm traveling to Vegas and LA for my birthday and Thanksgiving this week. Just in a few days, I'll be traveling. And so that means I'll be away for the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure if I'll be able to take the Journey of the Tarot on the road. I mean, it is a journey, but I won't have my singing bowl or the lighting. So I'm not sure if I'll be getting tarot videos out for the next couple of weeks. So it might be first week in December, we'll have another, right? We'll talk about our experience with the Hierophant and introduce the lovers. Unless I'm able to somehow do it there, we'll see. I'll do my best. And if I can't, I'll find another video. I'll post a different kind of video. So we'll still have a video on those Sundays. I even had a friend, I led a friend through an impromptu guided meditation to put her in touch with her inner divine feminine goddess energy and the manifestation of her ideal partner, although she is still hung up on a wounded man who is wounded and as a result in his feminine energy, baiting her to be more in her masculine and pursue him and attempt to control him. And then punishing her for showing up that way. So it's just mind games. And it might be unconscious on his part. But it's the opposite of the Emperor, really. So it brings out her inner Emperor, right, as we attempt to create balance. Externally as opposed to internally. And these dynamics don't work. So I led her in this work with the subconscious and named this aspect of her. Well, I had her name it. And to further anchor in the work and to allow her to summon this aspect of herself whenever she calls it. And owning her inner Emperor more would make it more conscious and prevent her from taking this bait, own her power, and call his bluff instead of falling for these lame attempts to keep her on the hook and on the back burner. Right, so if the Emperor is not a shadow aspect for you, if it's more integrated, you'll be able to recognize it when it shows up, right? And maybe even have stronger filters around it. Or attract someone who is in their power as well, right? So and I'm talking about the shadow aspects as well. The shadow aspects of the Emperor can be very controlling, right? Wanting control outside of oneself as opposed to self-control, and punishing, right, behavior, as opposed to accepting cause and effect and consequences. This really became clear to me this week. Funny though, also when I was writing notes, I pick a color for the archetype of the card. Last week I picked orange for, the sensual energy of the Empress. And then this week I picked like a charcoal gray color, a very dark gray for the Emperor. I thought that was fitting. And it was brand new pen, but I only had written like a page and a half of this very small journal. And it ran out of ink, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I think it was maybe the archetype of the Emperor saying that's not going to work for me. I need black ink. So I had to change color right away. I just thought about that today, even though I started journaling like the very next day. So that's interesting. That was an interesting little synchronicity or sign. The Emperor didn't like the charcoal gray I had selected. I've also been back to the gym full throttle. I thought the Empress would bring that influence to take care of my body, but I was more inclined to indulge in healthier sensual pleasures with her in the name of body love and self-care. And the Emperor is bringing on the self-discipline more. So my boundaries with myself are even stronger during this week, creating healthier, more empowering patterns through the self-control the Emperor brings. So that was very interesting. I anticipated with the Empress that I might feel that it's the right timing to really get back in the gym and taking care of my physical body and really going back there full throttle, because I had been going like here and there and not really being consistent, not having the motivation to be consistent. And with the emperor really brought that consistency, that mental strength, that self-discipline. That was very interesting. I noticed that my boundaries were really respected this week. People were seeking my approval more, and I was less likely to be teased, nagged, or messed with in any way. Even with relationships that are really well established, and that's just part of the pattern, because I can laugh at myself, and I feel like that strength with being able to be lighthearted and make fun of yourself and laugh at yourself. That's part of my strength. I feel that I don't take myself too seriously or certain things about life too seriously. But I found with the emperor, he really had this sense of authority as I took him on more and more, and did take himself very seriously. Like it was someone you don't want to mess with. And I don't even consciously know how I was putting that out there. It's just I noticed that happening, that I was being treated that way. And I guess the best way to describe it is intimidating. Like, I guess it was just an intimidating energy. I kept thinking, is this what it feels like to be a man? I found some people who must be bluffing at being dominant, putting their tails between their legs and walking on eggshells around me or in conversation with me. And others were intrigued and attracted to my confidence, inner strength, and certainty. And I reflected back to times that I attempted to put out this vibe, but it was more off-putting and less effective because it was contrived. It wasn't really a true expression of how I was really feeling or the state I was really in. I was trying to fake it till I made it. But I really was able to own it. It wasn't even charged. It's just how it was. And I wasn't even fully consciously aware of how I was showing up, how that was happening, right? I wasn't aware. It was just me integrating this archetype, right? But there was absolutely something different in my energy field as I attempted to, or as I attuned to this masculine archetype. I was having trouble seeing it show up externally for a while. For part of the week, I was really trying to force it, to work. I wasn't really seeing it. And I was on the phone with a friend, and she brought up that I may be forgetting that I'm a warrior, and that's how the emperor shows up sometimes. Maybe he's more of a light archetype for me than in my shadow than I initially thought. So I was grappling with whether, as you can hear, I was grappling with whether this was a light attribute for me or whether it was a shadow, and if I was strengthening the presence here by attuning, or if I was truly integrating an aspect that I had fragmented, right? Or not owned. So I think by the end, I realized that it was a shadow and I was integrating more, because I think that sometimes while I understand the differences biologically between male and female and the biological design of the brain and all of that, and our tendencies in behavior and abilities even, sometimes masculine and feminine energy is not that clear in my mind. And I think it's one of those things where I feel maybe I'm filling in the gaps informationally, right? Like I said about being an empath, sometimes you think you know more than you do. And I think maybe masculine versus feminine is one of those things where I know a lot, but I think being in it is different. You're not really objective until you really look and explore and dissect through a process like this, which is why I wanted to do it. I wanted to grow in this way, in awareness, right? Expand my consciousness of this. So then I was talking to another friend this week about how we show up in relationships, particularly romantic ones. I was telling him that I don't understand why he waits for approval or green lights and overthinks each behavior of the other person, testing for deception or integrity. I mean, I get it. I get overthinking as I'm prone, but it can make you overinvest in one person. Again, been there and done that, so that's why I know. That's why I brought it up. So I brought up the concept of just assuming other people want to be with you, which will absolutely vet out the fence sitters. He was resistant to doing so because he saw people in his world that did so to the point of delusion and did not want to become that. But I pointed out that I would never give a person like that the same advice, as not all wisdom is medicine for every person. His cautious nature and tendency to pull back to observe may be perceived as lack of interest and will only bait insecure people to try harder with him. He let that roll around in his head for a day or two, then tried it out for a couple of dates and had an incredible time. This is such an emperor attitude. Right? I mean, I think the emperor has this certainty about him and this authority and this confidence, and things are so much simpler. And I think that is masculine energy, isn't it? You always hear like men are simple creatures. They don't overthink these things. I really did experience that. Things were really simplified this week over time as I integrated. I was texting another friend about my videos and how I could improve them. I took the criticism rather well and was really open to it. To his surprise, he must have a history of offering opinions to insecure people, but I was thanking him for the feedback because I truly do want to grow, and acknowledging areas where I have room to grow isn't a threat to my self-image anymore. He made the comment that I must have Earth in my chart because when an Aries isn't balanced with Earth, he finds them annoying. I was like, well, I do have a lot of Earth in my chart, but I'm a Sagittarius, which is very different than an Aries, right? He laughed and blamed Mercury retrograde for the mix-up and sent me the slapping the forehead emoji. I said, no problem, because sometimes I'll think of him when I'm considering aspects of Aries men, and then I'll have to remember he's a Leo. So it's funny that we've both made the same mistake about one another. And the reason that has to do with the Emperor is because the Emperor represents the zodiac sign of Aries. So that was very interesting. We were projecting Aries onto one another. Very funny. And then also this week, I had a friend attempt to pin me down for a free healing session, and a couple of strangers began to tell me their life stories, you know, typical experiences for an empath. I was so on point. With my own inner discipline and all the things I wanted and planned on doing, that I wasn't as susceptible to these other people's agendas. So I found a way to politely decline, escape the conversation, or in the case of my friend, ask for reciprocation when we finally did have that conversation and healing session. And the last one with my friend was a challenge, but I celebrated the progress in improving my ability to receive and ask, right? And ask for support. That's not been a strength for me. So I celebrated that. I noticed the discomfort in these people when I brought in a boundary. I had the realization that avoiding setting boundaries in the past was to prevent their discomfort, and the discomfort of others, even when my entire system was screaming to get away or to say no. I also noticed that this discomfort created a bit of self-doubt and self-reflection in them. I started thinking maybe they should consider if this behavior is in need of changing. Why would you expect a perfect stranger to provide a free therapy session when I just let you know I do this work professionally? And maybe you should second guess spilling your guts to a total stranger, and perhaps you need to shift out of a sense of entitlement to free sessions from a friend constantly with no exchange. So my accountability was so clearly illuminated here. I was projecting my sensitivity onto others and enabling these behaviors out of not wanting to hurt others or trigger their wounds of abandonment or loneliness, therefore further anchoring it in by abandoning myself and modeling the behavior. This was so enlightening to me as I worked with the armor and logical thinking of the emperor, right? Because the emperor is in armor. He's in full body armor. And that did give me a sense as I tuned into that archetype, as I attuned and integrated, I did feel more self-contained. I did feel more protected. I did feel more logical, reasonable, rational. I felt that as a woman and spiritual healer, I've been conditioned to identify too much with my own pain, right? My pain body and my role in alleviating the pain of others. I have even felt shame in the past for not being accommodating enough or capable enough of preventing or removing discomfort and pain for others. I had the wrong job description. My pain has been my greatest teacher, and I've used it to create skill and mastery in some areas of life. How could taking that away from somebody be anything but enabling and preventative of their growth? And that's such an emperor thought. Because the emperor is also mature and wise. See, he has a white beard, right? Which can represent maturity, the maturity and wisdom of age and experience and growth, right? So I had that realization. It just came to me so clearly. Such a thought of an emperor, right? I had been projecting so much and getting so mixed up. It was so messy and convoluted, my energy, my perception, until I kind of got in the body armor of the emperor. That's why this process is so incredible. It's so transformative, more so than I ever thought it would be, to work with these archetypes and to take this journey by tuning into these archetypes. I never thought it would be so illuminating and enlightening. Like, this is a pattern that I've lived with, and I've only had this much clarity in dreams. When I once had a dream where I was pure consciousness, and that, so I was devoid of emotion and thoughts and time, the sense of time. It was just me there in this timeless, I was like a cluster of energy. And the vibe of the emperor wasn't unlike that, where things were very simple. I think it really did give me some insight into the male experience. And I've had that experience too in family constellation work when I was asked to step in and represent a man in the family. Because, being a representative in family constellation work is like consensual possession in a way. You are attuning to that energy of that person and their position in the system. And, it's incredible what you'll take on in those situations, what you'll tap into and channel. And in those scenarios, I did feel very rigid, very logical, right? Very willful, but it was also just this solid sense of myself, who I am, what I wanted, my agenda, as opposed to being so external about that and taking cues from other people. In the masculine energy, representing a man, I never had that sense. Like, it was always, I'm rigid, this is who I am, and you'll bend to my will, right? It's very interesting, the different experiences, bringing that understanding, because family constellation work is also about extreme compassion for others, so that we understand others' experiences and also our own accountability in the situations. So very, very interesting. It really helped me also discern between the masculine and feminine essence within me. So yeah. And then also tuning into the archetype of the emperor, I feel much more self-contained, like I was saying, with that body armor. And I have a more solid sense of my will, what I desire, my own agenda in all situations. This attunement to myself gave me much more self-trust and the awareness that I may need to observe others to discern whether or not they are trustworthy. But I don't need to enmesh with them to do so, which is self-abandonment. Bringing in the masculine counterpart of the Empress is really promoting balance in my experience. I'm noticing that when my sense of self is stabilized, I'm less emotionally unstable and able to see situations and relationships with much more clarity. I even had my best friend say, "You're blowing my mind with your insights about this person's wounding as opposed to mine and why their experience is different than mine." I just had like a laser-like focus and I was able to tune in. It just was, everything made sense. I had much more clarity, I suppose. I didn't see it as a brand new experience, but again, maybe it was the authority of the Emperor that made me more influential. I don't know. Because I even said to him, I was like, really? I feel like I've always been insightful. I feel like I've always given great advice and wisdom and perception. And he was like, I don't know, there's something about this week where, you know, you're really tuning in, tapping into things and you're blowing my mind. So I think maybe it's also this energy of the Emperor where the Emperor is taken more seriously. The Emperor is listened to. His words have weight, right? He has authority. So there must have been something to that now that I'm looking back, because I did feel like I always talk like this. Like I always see these insights. What do you mean? But I think that adding that influence of the Emperor just gave it more weight. I was taken more seriously, maybe. And it was also a more logical, rational, even calculating experience than my usual emotional bleeding heart tendency. I can see now how having a stable self-image can allow you to be a stronger leader. It's also a wise and mature outlook, less reactive and more accepting of the reality of human nature. So I feel less fragmented as a means to cope, right? There's less cognitive dissonance. Like everyone has their own will. People want their needs met. People have their own preferences. That was just more clear. Like that's the reality of the situation. So, instead of that, self-control helped me understand I don't need to come out of myself to attempt to bend reality. Maybe more accepting that this is how things are, might give me more insight into what the other person's agenda actually is, and instead of what it should be, right? What I think it should be. Maybe a more mature, wise approach is just to see things how they are and be more accepting of that and not see it as a threat, right? Because I have my own agenda. I have my own will. I have what I want to do, and I can move in more of a straight line, be more efficient in my own way, my own manifestation process, and not be so swayed by other people's agenda or what they think about what I want to create, right? Maybe their opinion doesn't matter as much as I actually thought, right? Or, and I definitely felt also like I don't need to explain why I want what I want. I just want it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I get into these sometimes argumentative situations, particularly with my mother, where I feel like I have to explain my point, explain my position, explain why I'm trying to create what I'm trying to create. And she's one of those people who she wants me to be safe, right? So she attempts to talk me out of things or argue with me about it, and it would create so much inner conflict. And this week with the Emperor helped me get to a place where it's, why am I doing that? Why do you even bring it up? Like, why do you need to prove it? Why do you need her support? If you're the Emperor, you don't need her support, right? You want what you want, and that's it. So it's very clear. The seat of my will is so clear. The way I attempt or approach it might be up for debate, but what I want isn't. That's just very clear. Which is a very different way of seeing it. Like what I want, my will, and what I want to create and manifest here in my life isn't up for debate. It's just what I want. I mean, how are you going to argue me out of that? Maybe my attempt to do so or the approach I take is debatable, but even then, maybe I'll go to people who've created something similar as opposed to someone who's never done it, right? So it just became clear about who I give authority to as well as I own my inner authority. Like, why am I giving her authority over it? What does her opinion matter? I mean, we all want support. We all want the emotional support. But I think that emotional support just became less valuable to me this week because it was my will and my agenda that kind of was stronger. It just carried more weight this week. Like I said, much more self-contained, very clear about my agenda, what I want, what I have planned for myself. Can I fit you in? Probably not today, right? It was just very clear, where before I would really be more flexible. I'd be really bend. I'd really stretch myself to try to help others or be there for other people, and I found myself being much more efficient about getting what I wanted to manifest or create done, just doing it. So, because there was less of this struggle with weighing in everyone else's opinion or agenda. And I didn't even realize I was doing that, right? Because that would be some advice I'd give somebody else. Like, why are you diluting your opinion? Why are you going around diluting your opinion? I had no idea the amount of time I wasted doing that for myself. Like, I wasn't even really cognizant of it until this week, where it was very clear. I was very solid in my sense of self. As an empath, that is not my experience, right? My experience is to enmesh, is to merge, is to come out of myself, to see where other people are at, and to gauge. And it's unconscious. It's not even, it's just the way my system has been entrained and conditioned, right? To keep myself safe as a child, and it no longer applies because now it takes me out of myself, and I am abandoning my inner child by seeing what this person needs. I can see how disempowering that is for myself and enabling it is for other people now. Thank you, Emperor, right? Thank you, Emperor. That was a really solid week, right? It helped me see that I am more feminine than I thought I was. That's because working with this archetype and then flowing into the Hierophant, these masculine energies, yeah, this is not this is not my typical experience. So I can see, yeah, I'm more feminine than I really gave myself credit for. That was my experience with the Emperor this week. What was your experience with the Emperor? Are you integrating as well? Are you seeing things happening outside of you as opposed to inside of you, or vice versa, to really discern whether this was a light archetype for you or a shadow, and maybe you're integrating more or strengthening this within yourself, or just aware, right, of how this is showing up? Let me know in the comments about your experience. And so let's introduce the Hierophant. Sometimes I say Hierophant, sometimes I say Hierophant. I think Hierophant is correct. I don't know that either is incorrect, but I like to be accurate. It's the actor in me, right? The singer in me. I want pronunciation to be accurate. This is going to be a challenging one because there's a lot of foreign references here, but I'm going to do my best. I did as much research as I could to be time efficient. I didn't, I'm not going to be precise, which will drive me crazy, but we'll get through it together, right? This is very interesting history. So let's get into the introduction of the Hierophant, the history. So in the Marseille deck, in the order of the trumps, which are the major arcana, right? The Pope, which is an earlier incarnation of what we now know as the Hierophant, is positioned after the Emperor and the Empress. although he is symbolically paired with the Papess, which is now known as the High Priestess, right? So the High Priestess and the Hierophant are counterparts. They're paired, but they are separated in the order. And the reason for that was explained in the High Priestess week, right? When we introduced the High Priestess. So the order that these cards are given in are about power, and the card that follows will trump the one before, and that is why they're in the order they're in. The Pope is the last of the 4 temporal rulers, each of which trumps the one before, right? Which I just said. The word temporal literally means the world of time, in contrast to the timeless and eternal. This is fitting for these rulers because they are all trumped by the images of time that come in the next act, which in turn are trumped by the images in the third act that transcend time. And as we learned previously, the major arcana are categorized in 3 acts, right? There are 22 technically, but we're going to see 21 cards in the major arcana, as the Fool card isn't part of the allegory. He's walking into the allegory, right? It's the first step in the Fool's journey. So we're not seeing the Fool as part of this story or the allegory. He's walking into it. So we're currently working on the first act, which is cards 1 through 7, right? And then there are 2 more after this, right? So this first act will end with the Chariot. The Pope card always shows the ruler of the Christian world seated on his throne with his triple tiara. This image is consistent in all tarot decks unless the Pope has been replaced by another figure. In the Tarot of Marseille, 2 attendants are depicted standing in front and facing him. The Pope was considered the highest ruler in the temporal world. It was the Pope who crowned the Emperor and made him come to Rome to accept the honor. In reality, the Pope's power was not uncontested by the Holy Roman Emperor, and history recounts their rivalries, but symbolically the Pope maintained the higher rank, which is why it explains the order, right? Furthermore, the Pope was also dominant in the religious sphere during the era when the Tarot was created. The Protestant Reformation had not yet occurred. And in the centuries before, the Vatican had ruthlessly destroyed any heretics who presented a religious alternative. As in Lull's romance Blanquerna, which is a novel written around 1283 by Ramon Lull, the first major work of literature written in Catalan, it chronicles the life of its eponymous hero Blanquerna, whose father had wanted to follow a religious life, but at the same time wished to experience matrimony. He gives his son an education based on religious and philosophical pursuits. In the second part of the novel, Blanquerna confronts the same choice between a celibate and married life, ultimately deciding to become a hermit, but also facing pressures from his mother to marry and his own sexual temptations. He later becomes Pope, reforms the church, and chooses a life as a hermit, like he'd always desired. So much like the plot of this novel from the 13th century, it is not the Pope, but spiritual authority. I was cut off, so I'm not sure where I was cut off, so I'll just say that again. So much like the plot of this novel, it is not the Pope, but the holy hermit who represents true spiritual authority. The Pope is about to be challenged by love, as the next card of the major arcana is the Lovers. Interesting, right? So we're seeing the power plays here. With each card becomes a more powerful figure in this allegory. And now let's look at the Waite-Smith symbolism of the Hierophant. So we're looking at this card, right? From the Rider Tarot deck. So pick that one up from my Amazon store in the description if you don't already have it. or one of the like, right, that uses the same symbols. I think I have a few options in there. It'll be the idealist journey through the tarot. So you'll see some ideas there. So the Hierophant, the word Hierophant is Greek for high priest and refers to the priest who guided the initiation into the Eleusinian mysteries. Eleusinian mysteries. That was one of the hardest ones to say. Although Waite chose the occult name, the figure on the card is clearly the Pope. He wears the triple crown and the crossed keys of Peter. The crossed keys of Peter, Saint Peter, both of yellow gold, are at his feet. 3 nails project from the crown, the tiara. From the top of his crown, a symbol of Christ's passion, and that, like the magician, he is one with Christ consciousness. 2 tonsured priests, which means they have the crown of their head shaved. 2 tonsured priests kneel at his feet, one wearing a chasuble, which is the sleeveless robe adorned by priests in ceremony or mass. They're decorated with roses, and the other one with lilies. Alchemically, the Hierophant is marrying the red and the white, right? So it's a ceremony here. An alchemical, and red and white are alchemical opposites with the occult, so that's what they're referencing with that symbolism. He wears a pallium, a white band around his shoulders and down his front, with 3 crosses in a vertical row down the center. At the base is a diamond, at the base is a diamond, there we go. So 3 crosses, and then at the base is a diamond, a symbol of the fourfold physical world. This is like the central column of the Tree of Life, a theme separated by the Hierophant's placement between 2 equal pillars. To the pillar of severity on our left, he offers the sign of blessing. And to the pillar of mercy on our right, the triple cross of martyrdom. Right? The Hierophant is like the central pillar connected to God and bringing the spirit down to earth. So let's get into the divination of what the meaning of the Hierophant may be if he shows up in a spread. The Hierophant represents the esoteric aspects of religion versus the esoteric represented by the papess or high priestess. He represents moral judgment, the determination of what is right and what is wrong. When used in divination, notice if he is blessing another card in the spread, right? If a card shows up on the side of the blessing hand, it might show what he's blessing. And, perhaps if it shows up on the martyrdom side, what is being sacrificed, right? Consider that. He represents the 5D divine masculine counterpart, right? So he may represent, if you're doing a love spread of divine partnership, twin flame, soulmate, whatever it is, karmic, he might be the 5th dimensional representative of the masculine, of that connection. So communing with the feminine on a spiritual plane. Higher learning, high priest, zodiac sign of Taurus, right? So looking for Taurus coming up this week. Religion, beliefs, commitment, education, keys to the kingdom, and knowledge and enlightenment. Sharing knowledge and blessings, morals, integrity, doing the right or moral thing. Marriage alliance, captivity, servitude, mercy and goodness, inspiration, the man to whom the querent has recourse. The wisdom of the past and ambition for the future. Put them together in this moment and you get the insight of the Hierophant. He is a man of all ages, an energy of better. He is good, he is great, he is kind. He may be an antidote to the patriarchal side of masculinity that can be jarring. He looks into the past and he improves. The Hierophant may borrow some of his knowing from ancient systems and traditional organizations, but he doesn't enforce them. He is open to differences and likes to grow with the times. He is a philosopher, a priest, a professor, a shaman, and a teacher. He can also represent tradition and convention, marriage, particularly in an arranged setup, a teacher or a counselor who will help in the learning or education of the querent, seeking counsel or advice, marriage, tradition, religion, learning, spiritual guidance, education, spiritual wisdom, religious beliefs, conformity, tradition, institutions, a desire to follow a process which has been well established, wanting to stay within certain conventional bounds of which could be considered an orthodox approach instead of being innovative. You will be adapting to certain beliefs and systems which are already put in place and in existence. It's better for you to follow social structures which are established and have their own traditions, perhaps with ceremonies, rituals, or other religious trappings and core values. So that's what's coming up this week with the Hierophant. So that'll be interesting for me. We'll see how that shows up in Vegas, in LA, right? I'm excited to see how more balancing of masculine energy can come in, particularly with these 4 temporal rulers. I feel like it was so powerful. The Emperor was definitely a shadow archetype for me. I integrated a lot this week and learned a lot from the Emperor. I didn't know if I would because I mean, I knew I would learn something, but I just wasn't sure if it would be beneficial for me, right? Sometimes I might look at a powerful man who is devoid of maybe emotion and think, well, then what is his sense of fairness, right? Or what is his, where does he place kindness, you know? But it was very interesting to see how logic and reasoning played out. And seeing life, you know, he has that symbol of the Ankh, right? A symbol of life. He just sees it in a more logical way, a simple way, which helps him make more logical, rational decisions, being so self-contained. I really benefited from that. I really benefited from that as an empath. That was medicine for me to feel that experience for myself. So I hope you had that experience too. And I'm looking forward to a week with the Hierophant so we can integrate even more masculine essence, right, in our spiritual process here. So now that we have some information about the Hierophant, I'm going to play my frosted crystal singing bowl so we can integrate the week with the Emperor even more fully and on a deeper level, and then send out the vibration of the bowl with the intention of calling in experiences and people that resonate with the Hierophant archetype into our experience, and also summoning that aspect of ourself. Okay? Letting it go far and wide so it can come back to us this week. Or these next few weeks, right? Depending on when I'll be able to get the next video out. Okay, so just getting in touch with your breath, close your eyes, and allow the sound of the healing, or the sound of the singing bowl to integrate and call in the experience of the Hierophant. Beautiful. Coming back to the room, letting go of that intention so it can go far and wide, right? Releasing and letting go to any expectations or attachment to outcomes. And just observing how this experience wants to play out in this next week or so. All right. So comment below and let me know how you're enjoying this experience. Are you integrating these archetypes? Is this illuminating for you as well? Also, if you want a personal session or reading, that information is in the description, as well as my Amazon store, again, for books, products, tools to help the empath. There is one specific idea list for the journey through the tarot, where you can see everything I'm using here. So yeah, I'm wishing you an amazing week with the Hierophant or more. As I said, I'll try to get another video out while I'm on the road. I'm not sure if it'll happen, so I don't want to promise. So at the most, it'll be the first week of December, we'll put out another video for the Journey of the Tarot. So it might be a long time with the Hierophant. We'll see. We'll see how it times out. I'm wishing you many blessings and transformation and illumination on this journey. So also, if you want to connect on other social media platforms, things like that, everything will be in the description, all right? Like this video so I know you're following along, and subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you get to experience the premiere of these videos. All right. Many blessings, empath. I'll see you in the next video.